So it's August 26th. We're at our Brownlee farm just outside of Moultrie, Georgia, which is where our company headquarters are located. This is where our container facility is, one of several, but today we're actually in our research greenhouse. And I'm joined by Dr. Graham Ford, Director of International Forest Genetics and Seed Company, and we're here to talk about our internal progeny test series, the seedlings that we're growing here, and kind of talk about what that is going to mean for you as a landowner, for us as a company, for us as a sales team. And so we're just going to have some conversations around maybe the process, kind of about how we got started, and maybe next steps as we go through the process. So Graham, give me some thoughts on what we're looking at today.
Yeah, Ben, so in the research greenhouse here this year, we're growing just our internal progeny test crop that will be, it's our 2022 series. So we're going to plant these seedlings this winter at total of 4 sites, a couple in the east and a couple in the west. And we also plant, as you know, co-op tests. We're associated and active member with the NC State Co-op in North Carolina. They're predominantly loblolly in the east, as well as CFGRP down at University of Florida, and then the Western Gulf Co-op out in west of the river. So since the division of the co-ops are kind of regionally split, any information that we want to get in comparing material from one co-op to another, we do that internally. Yep. So that's what we're handling here. So all the seedlings, all the seedlings that are going into the reps, as well as the buffer seedlings, block plots, we have sourced, produced all the seed ourselves in our breeding orchards and clone banks over in our R&D platform, and we're growing the seedlings ourselves. We'll install the test, manage those, and really at this stage the seedlings have been grown from seed that we sowed back in May, and you can see where they're at now. My technicians just top clipped these yesterday to about 10 inches. What we're doing there is just managing the uniformity, the balance of root and shoot, all that to create a really high quality seedling that we're again going to put into the progeny test
in our operational nurseries. So
exactly.
One thing Graham's talking about is this is an internal series, meaning we have co-op related responsibilities, and that gives us really great information, and it's third party verified, which is the backbone of who we are. But you have to have an internal program that runs parallel to that to add additional insight, additional value.
Yep.
And so these seedlings, through their efforts, are going to help bring us that information. And so it's a huge part of our program. Is really what we've been building to for years now. It's one of the main emphasis that Graham has within his program. Is why he has a team that now supports him in doing that. And so
progeny testing is a lot of work, as you're alluding to. Especially when we start to do internal testing. Co-op testing is a lot of work in and of itself, but then we do feel the need, and we do realize additional benefits from the internal progeny testing efforts, because it's the right thing to do to deliver a further detailed assessment of all the attributes that are important ultimately to clients, and then could also aid in deployment decisions.
So what are some of the traits, Graham, that we might glean from or be measuring or looking at over time that these seedlings would eventually be able to build in our program?
Yeah, so traits that we assess in any progeny test, be that co-op or internal, are traits that are ultimately economically important, and also traits that are heritable. And that's how we make gain, is we exercise some sort of selective pressure on the population and move the very best material forward. So traits like height and diameter, to give us an understanding of whole stem volume, that's the most important trait, because everyone's going to be selling those trees to either pulpwood or other dimensional lumber or peeler logs or even poles. And it's not just about volume, it's about quality of volume. So quality of volume is produced by lack of rust, so we're assessing rust resistance. In our internal / progeny test series, again, we're looking at loblolly here. We're looking at other pathogens that affect that species. For loblolly, it's predominantly fusiform rust, but also stem straightness, forking, ramicorn branches, other branch characteristics, and then a whole stem assessment that really gives us an understanding of the saw timber potential of that tree or that family.
Which is huge. So when we're talking to clients, anyone on our team, oftentimes volume is the main point, and we all agree with that. That without volume, we're not gaining tons. We get paid on tons. So volume is paramount. But the quality of the tons is important.
That's right.
And so understanding things that we want to eliminate from a stand, things
right.
that are within our control to put selective pressure on. At the end of the day, we want to bring gain in volume. We want to bring genetic gain in removing things from the woods that we have control over. Fusiform rust or pitch canker, forking to some level if we can, and really looking for the absolute best material that we can offer to our client base.
That's right. And the cooperatives are assessing predominantly volume, rust, straightness, and forking, and we do that in our internal trials. But as we've mentioned, we assess many other quality traits, and I believe that gives us an advantage in understanding in fuller detail the profile, the attributes that will be able to make that family, that particular either OP or full SIB family, particularly applicable for a client's needs.
So we've been talking about the seedling itself, but without some backstory about maybe the site. I think it's probably important that we speak to not only the seedling, the site selection, the site preparation, the eventual planting of the seedlings, and then the management moving forward. So this is kind of step one. What's going to be really interesting is we're going to follow this and several other seedlings through that entire process, and so we'll have a series of videos that we'll be able to show. But Graham, speak to, if you will, the site selection process, site preparation, weed control, planting, all those things as they go through the process.
Absolutely. So in order to produce a high resolution estimate on the genetic quality of the families, the parents that are represented here, their offspring are representing them, we have been this entire spring and summer locating our progeny test sites for this series, as well as our co-op test as well. What makes a good progeny test site is one that's, in one word, uniform. Also uniform and high quality, high production potential. So good soils, lack of issues from the logging activity or inherent defects in microsites if we're planting on an old field site. So this year we've found all the sites where these seedlings are going to be installed. Here in the east, we've actually found some old field sites that landowner was going to reforest. And old field sites are textbook. If they're the right soils, what we need to address is the nutrition. So what we've already begun doing on those old field sites is applying the proper fertilization regime, bring the pH down, get other macro and micronutrients in the right place for pines, because when it was in cotton or peanuts, different balance of those macros and micros.
So question, so maybe on an operational scale you wouldn't go to that extreme, right? Matching, it's got to be a completely uniform site. We're going to plant pine trees operationally where they were cut or harvested, where a clear cut is, and we're going to plant trees. So why is it so important that we have a uniform site?
Great point. I get that question a lot, and when we're scouting for sites, working with our clients, because as a seedling provider, we don't own the timberland base, so we work with clients that would be willing to partner with us, and we are very grateful for that. The reason we don't want to plant our progeny test over variable ground is because when you see a tree in the woods, it's a product of its genetics and the environment in which it is growing. So we want to select uniform sites that minimize the environmental noise and maximize the genetic signal. That's really what it comes down to.
It gives us valuable data, trustworthy data.
And that's what gives us the most high quality, clear data. Yeah.
So this seedling's grown and cared for in our nursery, just like it should be. The same manager that oversees our operational nursery is helping us oversee this crop, and he's phenomenal at doing that, Clark Duncan.
He helps us here.
Yeah, absolutely. He helps us here, managing the same way.
We consult with him, and he helps us look for anticipate our next moves here.
So speak to maybe some chemical site prep, maybe kind of that thought process, outplanting, and then give us some kind of thoughts on maybe weed control that we would do in a test like this.
It's a lot of work once you start finding the site and then getting the seedlings to the field, but the real work really begins when our technicians and contractors, and I'll go help them too, helping to lay out the site and get the trees planted. We want to do work in the before the trees are planted to make sure the site is prepped and ready. We in cutover sites have gone in and done mulching in order to make sure that we're achieving the best possible execution on the layout. And then we, again, as I mentioned, sometimes do fertilization beforehand. Here in a coastal series or a lower western Gulf series, you need to pay attention to particularly phosphorus, nitrogen, some of those biggies, but also boron, copper. And we've been handling some of those pre-plant fertilizations. We sometimes will do that after planting if we see issues, depending on the site. But also, as you mentioned, weed control is incredibly important to minimize the environmental noise, help these seedlings to capture the site, and then get up and grow and express themselves quickly.
Yes.
And we'll start measuring, we'll take a first year measurement to see how our survival and initial height is. Typically, if we're achieving about 3.5 feet in the first year, that means we did a good job on good site selection and good first year management with weed control in the spring, weed control in the summer, and we're using predominantly chemical weed control, sometimes mechanical if needed, but usually doesn't get to that. And then maybe one follow-up herbaceous weed control in the second growing season. Past that, a coastal series, coastal lower western Gulf series like this would be ready to measure if we've done everything right. First full measurement at age 4, where we're taking the litany of traits that we've discussed. Typically by age 4, we can achieve an average height of about 16 to 17 feet.
Yes.
What that height gives us is enough tree to assess all these really complex traits. We'll continue to manage the site and usually pick up 1 or 2 subsequent measurements on it before thinning, and then once thinning age, operational thinning age has approached, we've gotten all the data that we really need to understand the parents that are represented here.
So Graham and I always like to talk about the why.
Yeah.
Why does anything matter? Why does this matter? It matters because we're coupling third-party data with our own rigorous internal research to bring traits and value to you, our client. And so at the end of the day, we want to make sure our experimental design, we want to make sure the way that the site is chosen and managed brings us the very best data. We can make quality assessments, and we can bring accurate information to you to make good decisions about the genetics that you will deploy onto your landscape, and really just to bring as much value to you as we possibly can.
Yeah, the information that we'll get from these trials,
huge.
much like the trials we already have in the ground, the trials I'm already planning for next year that'll dovetail with this, what it produces, those data are valuable for us in making decisions in our orchard portfolio for OP production, for CMP production, and then also the data, the breeding values, those performance estimates out of the trials, we then pass on and discuss, as you're saying, with the clients to help make operational decisions. These trials affect so many different facets of current day deployment management decisions, but it's also important for us as we move forward and refine again our portfolio, our orchard portfolio, to be the highest quality material possible, and then bring in new material as it presents itself as we make parental selections and then forward selections out of these trials.
So I would encourage you to stay with us as we will track this and many other seedlings as they go from the research greenhouse to the site to eventual measurements and for traits. And it's our goal at IFCO Seedlings to bring you information that gives you an edge in managing your timber stand. Thank you for watching.